All right. Good to see you all. It's so nice to be here again. I saw Julie Caprera here, which is neat. She's back there somewhere. All right. Well, let's go ahead and begin. Uh, Julie, welcome. It's nice to see you. I'm gonna open us up in prayer, and then I'll share my talk here, and then hopefully we'll have some time for questions, and then we'll have a lunch break. Father, thank you for the sacred and amazing gift of children. I feel completely unworthy. I'm sure many of us do, and even unqualified to be a parent. But we thank you that you, as our loving Father, have resourced us and continue to do so to be effective. May we learn from you, our Father, that our children would love us and, more importantly, love you. We pray these things in the name of your Son. Amen. The question for our session today is, how do I get my child to obey? And this is a very real, a very difficult question. It's often asked in moments of desperation, after the fifth reminder, the raised voice, the standoff, or just the weariness of feeling like nothing is working. The way that even the question is asked, though, I'm gonna challenge it a bit, and I'm gonna say that I think that the question is somewhat misguided. How can I get my child to obey? It's asking, and I'm gonna unpack this a lot in my talk here, but it's asking about what is the formula or the technique that I need to invoke in order to get my child to obey. I'm gonna contend that the Bible has a much deeper, a much more self-directed, and a more, let's call it, long path to get to something even better, which in the end is more hopeful. So for those who don't know, my wife and I were parents of 9 children. Our oldest is in college. Our youngest is right here. She's 8 months old. And before we had our first child, we read a parenting book. It's a very well-known parenting book. And I remember feeling like we totally got this down. We read this book. I knew the book well, and like, man, this is going to be great. We were pros before we even got started. And that sense of confidence was deflated. It was a lot harder than the book made it sound like. Even though there was some truth to the book, I won't say there was nothing there, but this problem of overconfidence and frankly relying on what I thought was a surefire technique just did not work. Our goal, hopefully we would all agree, our goal is not an instant result. Our goal is a formed character. We want our children to have deeply formed character that's going to last for a lifetime. And we have to keep our eyes on that longer term goal of what does it take to produce character. Because this has been mentioned in previous sessions, sometimes you're tired, you're frustrated, maybe you're even burned out, and you just want peace and quiet. And sometimes in the name of securing that peace and quiet, you can actually be at odds with that longer term goal of producing that godly character. And so for this reason, one of my major pet peeves is kind of these overpromised slogans or titles that I just think can't deliver. You've probably seen videos online where it says something like, speak a language fluently in 2 months. And you're like, oh, this is great. I would love to be able to speak a language fluently in 2 months. And you click on it and maybe even try it, and you realize there is no way you're going to be able to speak a language in 2 months. There's no way. It's just not going to happen. It is clickbait. It is false advertising. And I remember we went to Mass Hope, which is a pretty large homeschool conference here, and there was a speaker who had I won't say the speaker's name or the exact title, but it was something like, have a new child in 7 days. And I remember thinking, this is amazing. I want to go to this. And we bought the book, we went to the talk, And we tried, and it didn't work. It did not work. And again, it's clickbait. It's the kind of stuff that if you fall for it, and it's easy to fall for it because you feel desperate, right? You feel, I get it. You feel overwhelmed. You're going to be disappointed. It's going to take a lot longer if the goal is character formation. I want to divide up the topic at hand into younger children and older children, and I do think they're different. My definition here, for the purpose of this talk, the definition I'll give of a younger child is around less than 7 or 8, and then I'll say an older child is greater than 7 or 8. Okay, that's just for some reasons that will become clear, a useful partitioning. For younger children, less than 7 to 8, I do recommend a book, and I'll give you the title of the book. It's called The 4 Components of Effective Discipline. It's by Tim Calderwood. I think it's only available on Kindle. I don't think you can actually get it in paper. I could be wrong. It's more of a booklet. If you print it out, it's like 15 pages. It's very short. It'll take you less than an hour to read. I checked this morning, and it was $5 on Kindle, which is, depending on your perspective, it's a lot for a 15-page book, but it's actually worth it. I would highly recommend that if you haven't read it, that you read it a couple times, and then I've gone through it so many times. It's actually really good. And I'm not going to, yes, it is The 4 Components of Effective Discipline by Tim Calderwood. We have gotten to know Joanne Calderwood, who is also a homeschooling mom, who's written another book, which is a different topic there. They have produced great children. Their children are very impressive, and I like when the proof is in the pudding. I like when there's good results there. And I'm not going to go through very much of the book, but just to give you a tiny window into this, I'll just hopefully encourage you to read the book by sharing a little vignette from it. But he says that 2 of the 4 keys are consistency and loving application. And I'll share a little story here. So this is my laptop, and this laptop for me is like my third arm. This is like an extension of who I am. I use computers a lot for my work, and having my laptop not be touched by a child is very important to me. And once I had this observation that, you know what, I literally, I'm here I am. We've had children for so many years. I've never had a child damage my laptop, mess with my laptop. There's like a force field around my laptop. They just don't get near it. And I thought, why is this? Why is it that my children don't get near my laptop? And it's because I have ultra consistency to the highest degree from a very young age. Actually, it was last night. I don't know if you saw this. Last night at 8 years old, she was there sitting about, 8 months. At 8 months, she was starting to reach over. Here's something shiny. No. And, I did my elevate, and she could look at me, and she was like testing me. We had this little back and forth. No. And she a couple times. And sure enough, I won that little contest there, and she did not mess with my laptop. And I'm convinced it's because I have had consistency that is near perfect with this. I wish I could say that in all domains, but at least with my laptop, I have near consistency, near perfection on the consistency side. I'll read you a little vignette from the book just to give you a sense of how they approach this. So they had a run-in with the child here. And so I'll read it. So almost all of our children went through a stage at a very young age where they tested our resolve. The resolve testing usually happened when the kids were about 18 and 24 months of age. This was usually a one-time refusal to comply with a given request that often went on for hours. For instance, one of our children who was approaching the age of 2 did something wrong and knew she should apologize to her mother. We said, "Please say I'm sorry." But we were met with a stony silence from this cute little girl. We applied the requisite swats to the posterior a couple of times, but it was clear that there was not going to be an immediate attitude adjustment. We put her in her bed, which was still a crib, so it wasn't easy for her to climb out, and told her that she could come out after she apologized to her mother. After repeatedly requesting an apology, she still remained silent. The saga began one evening after supper. By breakfast time the next morning, she still wouldn't apologize, so we fed her and put her right back into her bed. By the time I had to leave for work in the afternoon, she still wouldn't apologize, so I called in and took the day off from work. Yes, that's how important I felt it was. This was a critical juncture in the life of my young daughter. If I failed her here, I might never get another chance to break her stubbornness, and even if I did, it would almost undoubtedly be multiplied many times harder. During the rest of the day, Joanne and I would occasionally go into a room together and ask if she was ready to apologize to her mother for whatever it was. The funny thing is, I don't even remember what the original infraction was, but I'll never forget the ensuing battle of wills. About 24 hours from the first infraction, after being fed supper without dessert and being put back into her bed, she still hadn't apologized. One may be tempted at this point to think that she was just too young to understand what we wanted her to do, but we found that children almost always know much more than we think they do, and at a much younger age. Later that evening, Joanne and I went back into a room. Joanne happened to be eating a bowl of ice cream at the time, and as soon as our daughter saw that ice cream, her face softened, her eyes lit up, and she said, "Sorry, Mama." There was much rejoicing, hugging, and praise, and yes, we let her have some ice cream. We didn't deliberately use the ice cream as a bribe, but when she saw what was missing, it dissolved the last of her resolve, and we got the behavior we were looking for. Notice, too, once we got the apology, reconciliation was instantaneous, and the incident was over with no carryover. After this, she was a different child. She was happy, largely compliant, and sweet. As with all of our children, this behavior did come back on occasion, but never with anything like the intensity of the first time, and it got progressively easier to deal with each time. With their children, if you read the books, you'll find that they didn't have to spank after the age of roughly 7 or 8 because of these 4 components: the consistency, the loving application, which is a big deal, which actually I want to talk about next. One of the other things that they stress in the book is loving application, and they use hugs a lot, and they use physical affection and just kind of a disposition to remind your child how much you love them. In our home, we use the bathroom as our, go to the bathroom. That's the place where we do discipline. It's not because we think they need to use the bathroom, but because that's just a nice, quiet place for us to talk. And one of the things that I have learned over the years is that, especially in those moments, and again, I'm focusing on younger children here, if you can get yourself in a place where you can genuinely remember how much you love them, how much you care for them, and what is endearing to you, it will be a very different experience. So I keep a little file on my phone and on my computer. It syncs between the two, of just endearing little things about them that I've done for many years now. And I like to use this as a way to remind myself, to get myself in the place of to be able to say, man, I love this girl, this boy, whoever it is. I'll read you a couple of entries from this that just help me at least. First one is from April of 2022. One of our children was playing in the bathtub, and he baptized his rubber ducks in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. And I just think, that is so cute. I love that. Another time, this was January 8th, 2024. We were reading in the Bible about David's 10 concubines. One child asked, I have all the child names written down, but I won't say them because some of them are here. One child asked, "What's a cubicle?" Didn't quite get the word concubine. I explained that a concubine is someone that the king sleeps with that isn't his wife. Another child asked my wife about the 10 concubines and said, "They must have a huge bed." So these are the kinds of things, right? Whatever it takes to get you in that frame of mind where you can genuinely say, wow, I love this child. You got to be in that frame of mind. Because one of the most important verses, I really do think that this verse is a great parenting verse, is anger. It's from the book of James. Anger does not, what? Fill it in. What's the rest of that? Anger does not? Yeah, work the righteousness of God. If you do something in anger, it will not produce a good outcome. You might get some near-term compliance, but it will not produce long-term good effect. Okay, so I've made that mistake. You probably have too. It's not going to work. You have to put yourself in a place of a heart that really is well disposed for loving your child. Now, older children are more complex. It's much deeper water. We'll talk about them in a little bit. As I said, I highly recommend that book for the under sevens, but over seven, I'm going to recommend a different book and give a challenge at the end. One of the keys and one of the main differences with older children is that it's much more, if you're doing it right, it should be much more about heart level responses than about behavior. And I've made this mistake many times. Behavior is really revealing what's in the heart. It's revealing what's in the heart, what someone loves, what they fear, what they trust. And because the goal is to address the heart, we have to spend a lot more time engaging with the heart. One of the things that again we've learned over the years is that if your discipline session is just a whap 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 and then you're done kind of thing, well, you're not gonna have good fruit from that. It's not gonna work. You haven't really engaged the heart. You have to be willing to have conversations. What were you wanting in the moment? I know the situation you're facing is hard. Tell me about it. That is often the last thing you want to do because you are in a place of frustration or impatience. But being willing and ready to have those conversations is really important. Thus, one of the major obstacles to discipline is actually time. It's that we're often just, I'll say, quote unquote, busy with whatever it is that we're doing. And frankly, it's hard sometimes to think, this is just a kid. This is a 10-year-old or whoever it is. Like, they live such a simple life. We might think in the back of our mind, you don't know what life is really like. But in their little world, whatever they're facing might be overwhelming. So much of parenting is the art of entering into the world of your child, empathetically entering the world of your child. I loved some of the material we covered yesterday on the temperaments because I think that's a great tool to really help us to enter into the world of a child, and to do that sympathetically and empathetically. We can't enter into their world as a 50-year-old or a 35-year-old or 39-year-old or however old you are, but we have to try to enter it from their perspective. I'm actually gonna make another set of statements here that is really important. I told you before we had our first child, we were so sure we knew how to parent. We were very confident. Not only that, but if you had asked me this, I'm totally sure if you had asked me this question when I was single before, or even when we were married, before we had children, are you patient? I said, absolutely. I'm a paragon of patience. Do you get angry? No way do I get angry. I am cool as a cucumber. I'm not going to have any issues. I was a physician for a while, and I had really sick patients who had most of the patients that I had a disease called TTP, thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura, and they were really, really sick, and they had lots of stuff going on, and they would crash and cut it. But I would be really cool. I was always known for that. But now, post-parenting, if somebody asks me, are you patient? No, I'm really not very patient at all. And I, in fact, have seen plenty of impatience in my heart. Do you get angry? Yes, I do. I will be very angry. I will be very candid with you, and I will say there have been several times where my buttons have been pushed and I have been angry. Do you stay cool under pressure? Outside of the home, yes. Inside the home, often not. This is one of the real gems of parenting. This came up in the panel that was before, is that parenting is a huge sanctifying tool because it first shows you what's actually inside. If you would, like I said, when you asked me those questions when I was single, it was just because I hadn't been in circumstances where my impatience came out. That's the reality. Parenting is just way harder. It's a sanctifying tool where God is blessing you by showing you your areas of weakness and sin. So as I think about parenting now, now that have much more experience, I will say 70% of parenting is actually on the parent. It's actually just about having your own heart be sanctified. 70%, the vast majority. 20% is empathetically entering into the world of the child. And then about 10%, so a small minority, is about the specific techniques and principles that are focused on your child. Okay, so it's really not, it's not the proportions that a lot of people think. The focus, however, in a lot of these seminars and a lot of these books is on the 10%. It's like, what do I have to do to get my child to do this? What do I have to do to do that? You know, all that. But I will tell you right now that it will not work if you neglect the 90%. It just won't. It will not work. So we should, in fact, start with the 70%. The 70%, like I said, is the work on your own heart, the sanctifying work on your own nature that needs to be dealt with. So before we talk about obeying on behalf of children, the children's obedience, we should ask, what do our children observe with our own obedience? How do they see us behave when we are faced with difficult situations? How do they hear us respond to authority? All of us have authorities in some way. Certainly we have the authority of God's word, but do they hear us speak respectfully, to respond respectfully to authority, or cynically? Do they watch us repent when we are wrong? Basically, what is discipline? Discipline is asking somebody else to repent, right? Isn't that another way to think about what discipline is I'm calling you, child, to repent. But then how do we fare, and how do they see us when we are repenting or not? If the obedience that we are modeling is inconsistent or cynical, we should not be surprised when our children resist, not just us, but even authority itself. So parenting there with respect to obedience then should really begin not with questions of how do I control my child, but with how do I repent? How do I model obedience? I think another great parenting verse that is, I don't know that I've ever heard anybody use this as a parenting verse, but I think it's an amazing parenting verse, is the beginning of Matthew 7, very well-known passage where Jesus speaks about the log and the speck. You know, he says, why are you going after a speck when you have a log in your own eye? I think this is a brilliant parenting verse because if we are asking our child to do anything, we better make sure that we have done it well. Yesterday, for those who were in my session, when I talked about the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset, this was one of the themes, is that sometimes we ask our children to do things that we may not be willing to do ourselves. Let's think about whining. It's a common problem. If this thesis is right, and I'm pretty sure that it is, from my experience, that 70% is actually more on you. What is the first thing that we should do when we think about whining? We should say, well, okay, of course, like very few parents are going to be like, speaking in the whining ways that a child does, like that kind of high voice. Like that's not how parents do it. But our forms of whining are going to be complaining. It's going to be annoyances. It's going to be being short with someone. It's not going to be, again, the childish manifestation of whining, but there's an adult form of whining, which is, what it is for you. And we all know what it is for you. So we should first ask, if I have a child who is whining, how do I have a complaining heart? What does whining look like for me? What does being annoyed look like for me? What are those manifestations? And how am I dealing with that? What are the thoughts in my own mind that I have that I'm nursing that are basically negative? Let's think about the problem of fighting. Huge problem, right? So if you have more than 2 or 3 children, you are going to have fighting in your home. It's going to be inevitable. How do you respond when you are annoyed? I will say one of the things that I've been noticing in myself is I will make a snide remark when somebody comes at me. That's kind of my way. I'm not gonna punch them. I'm not gonna do anything like that. But my mechanism is some kind of a snide remark. That is a form of fighting. It's not fists like a child would do. It's an adult way of fighting. right? There are plenty of ways that adults fight using backhanded remarks, snide remarks, right? We do that. We do that in different ways. How are we dealing with that? I'm gonna make the claim that children are theologians of hypocrisy. I don't know. You've probably seen this. You've been to the beach sometime, and there's the guy who has the Geiger counter, and you know how they walk around. Is it a Geiger counter? Yeah, a Geiger counter, and they're like looking for metal, and they're just searching for somebody who's left their watch somewhere on the beach, and it's a metal detector. It's not a Geiger counter. It's a metal detector. That's the word I was looking for. A metal detector, and they've got this little device that's sweeping the beach. Have you seen that? And they're searching for something, and it goes dee 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 if they go over a piece of metal, and a child is kind of like that. They're like a metal detector, but it's a hypocrisy detector. And it's, instead of running over the sand in at a beach, it's running over your heart. So it's going over and it's just sweeping over your heart, and it's looking for that, right? And whenever that signal lights up, they're going to find that. I don't know how, but somehow God made our children to be really good at that. And then that behavior will come out in a childish way. It won't look exactly like yours. It'll come out in a childish way. And so we should be really thankful. We should be incredibly thankful, because this kind of sanctifying metal detector over your heart is a gift, because it's going to expose stuff that you didn't even know was there. Just like when you go to the beach and there's a watch buried underneath that you can't see, and the metal detector finds it. I was that same way. If you had asked me when I was 25 years old, are you patient? Yeah, I'm patient. That Geiger counter hadn't been swept over my heart until we had children. So this is really, really, really important. Marriage will do it to some degree. Parenting will do it more. Homeschooling will do it a lot more. So there's kind of steps here of sensitivity to this metal detector. Marriage is your first one, where you got to live with somebody else, and you're going to have lots of collisions and things like that. Parenting definitely takes it up tenfold. Homeschooling will take it even more. Okay, so this is a very, very, very important concept here, where if we're asking questions about how do I get my child to obey, let's first stop and say, what about myself? Have I done the 70% of heart work and sanctifying work that needs to happen ahead of that? And then, as I said, the 20%, let's see if you're staying awake. What's the 20%? Yeah, entering into their world. Okay, that's hard to do. It's hard to do if you're busy, if you're rushed, if you just don't think enough about what is it like for this child who's 7 years old, 10 years old, 14 years old. What are they facing? What are their struggles? You know, I sometimes rewind the clock, and I play back to when I went to public school, junior high and high school. And now I look back, and the things that to me were big at the time look very small, but at the time they were huge. You know, like, are people going to like me? Do they care about me? What, you know, like, you have all these like questions that are enormous in your world. And now I look back at them and I'm like, oh, that was just nothing. And it's tempting to do that and to just sweep it away and to think like they're not big because they're not big for me, but they might be huge for somebody else. Okay, on the final 10%, because I do want to address this before giving this challenge here, I want to use an analogy, and it's an analogy that I hope you find helpful. I think it's helpful. It's the analogy of teaching someone how to swim. Okay, so I'm assuming most of you in the room know how to swim or have gotten swimming lessons. I got swimming lessons, I think I was like 8 years old, something like that. And it's scary, right? You're standing at the edge of that pool and you think like, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die if I get in this water. And Indians especially, we're afraid of the water. Like, Indians in general just don't like water. My parents to this day don't know how to swim. There's this mentality of like, water is like scary, don't go there. And Indians are like just terrible swimmers in general. And I'm sure I picked that up to some degree. But you look at this water and you think, I don't know how to do this. The water's deep. I could die. And here you're asking me to get into this water and learn how to swim. Now, what you should never do, hopefully, is as the swimming instructor is you stand on the side of the pool and you throw them in and you just yell instructions at them. Not a good way to teach a child to swim, right? What do? What does every good swimming instructor do? You get into the water first, right? You get into the water first, and you go into the shallow end and you hold them close. You hug them, you keep them near you, you speak calmly, and you develop this kind of a rapport with them in the water. In the beginning, swimming is actually about trust, isn't it? Like there's some level of trust where you trust the parent or your swimming instructor, a friend, an older sibling, whoever it is that is helping you do that. It's much less about imparting techniques, at least in the beginning, right? Like you just want to get them to be comfortable with the idea of this is feasible. I'm going to be here with you. You're not going to die. I'm going to hold you. Obedience actually works in a lot of the same ways. So I want to contrast here obedience versus compliance. They're different concepts. Obedience, and this is a definition that I wrote, that I try to come up with, that tries to capture what the Bible means by obedience and what I think we as parents should be aiming for. Obedience is following a person from the heart because you trust the person who gave the command. Okay, I'll say that again. Obedience is following a person from the heart because you trust the person who gave the command. I think that's a pretty good definition. And the reason I like this is that it distinguishes between obedience and compliance. Compliance is where somebody's making you do something, usually because if you don't do it, you're going to get some kind of a punishment. We have a compliance department at the company that I work for, and if we get out of line, we'll get a letter from them, from our compliance department, and they will threaten a fine and they will threaten consequences and SEC escalation and all these things if we don't do X, Y, and Z. I get it. It's important. And that's a fine thing for them to do. Compliance is at its core, though, something where it's fear-based. It's much more about you're going to get punished if you don't do this particular behavior. I hope that, using this swimming analogy, there's an enticement to swim. Like all children, I think, want to be able to swim. They see someone swim, and it's pretty impressive. But the means of doing that is through trust. It's like you're trying to woo the child in some way. You're trying to get them to believe that it's possible by this surrogate trust that they have in you. Now, again, you don't push the child in. That's a terrible way to do that. Then they're going to be panicking. Some people try to do teaching that way. I don't think that's a good way to do it. In the same way, you can have a child comply out of fear, and I have done this at times. But like you're just really mad, and you just drop the hammer, and you can spank or whatever. But that's compliance. That's all compliance. Obedience, instead, is when a child willingly is following instructions from the heart because they trust the person waiting for them. And so this kind of language shows that there's a lot more relational component to obedience than I think we appreciate. Okay, so hopefully from this, we can now say, wow, I got to think long and hard about how's my relationship with my child. Is this one where we have a good relationship of trust, or is it me barking orders, standing by the side of the pool? Okay. A swimming instructor is very empathetic, aren't they? Isn't a good swimming instructor like, you can do this, I believe in you, and they hold you, and it's a good experience, right? Like a good swimming instructor is quite pleasant. They're very calm. Swimming instructors don't yell. They give very nice, consistent directives. Kick your legs, hold your breath, keep your eyes on me. There's a safety that comes from being with a good instructor. They're not unpredictable. That would produce fear. Instead, they're calm and consistent. As I said before, there's almost always some degree of trust, some degree of relationship. They're held close. If they swallow water and they're coughing, okay, you let them sputter. Do you scold them? What are you doing? Why did you put your head in the water? And da 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 da, right? Swimming instructors don't do that. They're really good at not doing that. They're generally saying things like, I got you. It's okay. You can do this. Correction in the context of being a swimming instructor comes in the context of presence. If you correct without connection, that will communicate a form of rejection. I'll say that again. Correction without connection communicates rejection. Connection without correction communicates indifference. We don't want to do either. So we want to have both correction and connection, but it really does start with some degree of connection. In the case of an older child, again, I mean by this older than 7 or 8, we're trying to get at the heart. Behavior is a little bit like the tip of the iceberg. There's the behavior on top, and there's all this stuff underneath the water, which is their heart. All the desires, all the fears, all the loves that are there. If you're addressing behavior, you're chipping ice at the top of the iceberg. That's not going to do a lot. If you can get at the heart, well, then you can actually reshape the overall direction of the child. Sometimes a child doesn't get into the water, not because they're rebellious, but because they're afraid. There are times it can be rebellion, but sometimes it is just out of fear. And so a wise parent can probe and ask questions like, what are you afraid of? What is going on here? In parenting, this is very important, not all disobedience is defiance. This is a mistake that I have made. It is very easy to make an equivalence relationship between disobedience and defiance. Sometimes it is, but it's actually a minority in most children. Most disobedience is fear, insecurity, confusion. They're caught up in something else. It's not usually an overt defiance. Again, sometimes it is. I'm not going to whitewash it and say it never is. But what we want to do is recognize that when it is something else that's not defiance, fear, insecurity, confusion, distraction, what have you, then it is very, very, very important that we double down on the entering into their world and really trying to identify what is the root of all of this. One huge lesson that comes from swimming instruction is that you have to be very patient. You have to be very repetitive. It takes a long time. Some days go well. Some days it feels like you're starting over. Progress is uneven. No swimming instructor says, you should have figured this out by now, right? That would not be appropriate for a swimming instructor to say. But often we say that, sometimes out loud, sometimes silently, and we expect a much more rapid pace of change. Now, as I look at my own life, and I think about how patient God has been with me, I am incredibly humbled. Think about your own sin patterns, whatever they might be, and think about how patient God has been with you. Has he zapped you, or has he been patient with you? We are called to mirror that patience. This overall analogy that I'm running with here on the 10% of this swimming instructor one is valuable, because I also think that aside from the metaphor of this connection and safety and trust that's there, I think it does say and hopefully communicates to us that there are times and places where even a swimming instructor will say, stop running next to the pool. You've heard that. Why do they do that? They do that not to punish them, but to protect them. We do, and we're here as parents to instill a whole set of values in our parents that are going to lead to their long-term protection. Water is good, but it has to be approached rightly. I also find very helpful in thinking about this, the example of the prodigal son and the father. when we see the father in the story there, he's not waiting with crossed arms. He is much more about the relationship before the correction. He restores before he lectures. And it's funny, we don't actually, maybe he did get a lecture later on, but we at least don't have a record of that in Luke where that's recorded. He celebrates before he corrects. I think these are great principles for us with that 10% as we do more child-facing interaction. Eventually, something beautiful happens, and it's been really nice to see this in, I would say, especially some of our older children, where the child lets go, they float, they swim, they're better at you than swimming. They can do things that you never thought they could do even when they began. They swim not out of fear of you, but because they've learned to do it on their own. They don't need you anymore. The trust and the gratitude remain, the relationship remains, but you're not on top of them. There's no compliance anymore. I've been especially pleased with this in one of our older children. Parenting is teaching our children to swim in a deep and sometimes dangerous world. We can't control the water, and we cannot swim for them. In those younger years, we can stay close, speak truth to them, and reflect the heart of a parent who wants to have that long-term relationship with them. And isn't it great that God has not shouted commands from the side of the pool, but in Jesus, he entered into the water himself. In my last 10 minutes here, I want to give a challenge. So as I've said, I think in parenting, 70% of parenting is sanctification of the parent, managing oneself through incredibly stretching, incredibly demanding conditions, especially for the mother. 20% is empathetically entering into their world, and only 10% is child-directed instruction. And again, this analogy of the swimming instructor is really important to remember the fears and that it's often not defiance. What I want to do is I want to spend my last 10 minutes giving a challenge, and this is a very specific challenge with some accountability to it. I'm hoping that for a lot of us in 2026, it's going to be a year of some breakthroughs with our parenting, where we see things that we've not yet seen. Some of you who know me well and have heard me speak on this know that I'm really into habits and there's a set of books that I recommend at Sattler that our students read here. One of the books is Atomic Habits, James Clear, and one of the immortal lines from the book that I probably quoted this line, 100 times, is he says, "You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." Great line of the book. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So if somebody says, New Year's here, right? We just had New Year's resolutions for a lot of people. I'm going to lose 20 pounds. I'm going to do this for work. I'm going to accomplish this. I'm going to do that. Like when I hear those things, I tend to be somewhat skeptical because I think a way better goal would be, I'm going to go for a 20-minute walk after dinner every day. It's more of a habit goal, a process goal, as opposed to an achievement goal. And we, as human beings, it's very easy for us to set these lofty goals and miss them because we've forgotten that really what matters way more are our systems. Our day in and day out systems that we put into practice are going to be ultimately what determine how we succeed. And we are so forgetful, aren't we? When you read in the Bible, you read in the book of Numbers about the Israelites, and they had all these amazing miracles, and then a month later they've forgotten and they're chasing some idol, and you just think, what's wrong with you people? Well, then how many times have you heard a sermon and you're just blown away and I'm gonna remember this forever, I'm gonna do this, I'm not gonna sin in this way, and then a month later you're in the gutter because you've forgotten about that very thing yourself. We are not that different from the Israelites. One of the practices that I've done for some time, I call it truth-based transformation, or TBT. And basically, I've divided up my world into 7 categories. So parenting is one, time management is one, holiness is another one. I've got these 7 categories. And if I ever hear something that's really life-shaping or amazing, then I put it into this. I have 7 files, and then every day of the week I can review one of these files. And it's amazing how even in the course of a week I can forget. And they're constantly being updated and changed, but for me, it's just a very powerful way to be sanctified. I told you that the book that I recommend for younger children is this Tim Calderwood book, The 4 Components of Effective Discipline. The book that I like for older children, 8, 9, 10, and above, is one that some of us just went through. Matthew led a book study of this. It's called Discipline That Connects with Your Child's Heart. It's by Jim and Lynn Jackson. And it's a great book. I highly recommend it, that you should all read if you're a parent. It's an amazing book. And so I'm going to issue a challenge here, and the challenge is going to be as follows. It's a 28-day challenge. I said in my title 30 days, but it's actually 28 days. And it starts February 1st, and it ends February 28th. So it's really discrete for 1 month. And here is what the challenge consists of. It's going to be a WhatsApp group. Totally optional, but for people who want accountability, it's going to be a great way to move forward. The ask before February 1st is that if you have a child greater than 7 to 8, that you start or complete that book, Discipline That Connects with Your Child's Heart. If you have younger children, you have a really easy job because it'll take you like less than an hour. But go through that first book I recommended, the Tim Calderwood book. Just read it. Read it once. And then here's what the specific challenge is. And I will say it's geared at couples. I don't think there's any single parents in the room, but this is geared at couples. And we're going to be doing this. My wife and I are going to be doing this together. So for those who join, you will get my truth-based transformation little notes from the book, Discipline That Connects with Your Child's Heart. It's very short, but it'll be much more meaningful if you've read it or gone through it yourself. And the challenge goes as follows. Every night, what you're going to do is 3 things. You are going to sit with your spouse and have just a social time. Talk about your day, whatever's on your heart, ideally over a warm drink. We've been experimenting some with warm drinks in our home, so it can be an herbal tea. My wife made once a hot chocolate with no sugar. It was excellent. Whatever the drink is that suits you, I would highly recommend as a way to just sit and have like a little mini date. Okay, 15 minutes, something like that. And then what you do is you just review the principles of this particular book, and you assess yourself against the principles that are taught in the book. So if you don't know the book, it's okay. You can go through it and read it, but it's things like connection, safety, things very in line with what you've just heard from my talk today. And then the last thing is you're just going to pray together, you and your spouse, for your children, okay? If you can do that for 28 days, you have now laid the foundation for the system that is going to propel you to amazing heights as parents. Okay, so this is more of a process goal as opposed to an achievement goal. And I'm hoping it continues. So again, 3 components, so simple, right? The first one is what? Just having a little mini date, just talking with your spouse about anything you want, whatever is on your heart. If you face something difficult in the home, at work, whatever it is, just talking. What was number 2? What's that? Oh, over a hot drink. Thank you for reminding me. Yes, especially over hot drink. It makes it a lot more fun if you can do that and experiment with different drinks. We recently had an almond milk matcha latte that was amazing. That was a particular drink that I've grown fond of. But experiment. On the WhatsApp group,